Welcome to another episode of the Nanaya Yebwe Show. I had the extreme pleasure of having a conversation with Dr. Paul Thornton, who is an author and a passionate cruiser, if that is a word. In this podcast or show, we had an insightful conversations about, passions and story, the power of story, and the books he's written. I hope as I enjoy doing this show, you also enjoy listening to the different stories that people share and you learn a bit one or two from them. Thank you to my viewers. Thank you to my listeners. With your support, with your help, this show gets bigger and bigger. If you've not subscribed to the show, please do so either on YouTube or follow us on Spotify. Wherever you listen or watch, please do subscribe and support. It's growing and it will keep getting bigger and bigger guests coming onto the show as time goes on. Thank you. This is Nanaya Boy. Hello, viewers and listeners. This is the Nanaya Yebwe Show. Today, with me, I have a very handsome gentleman, Dr. Paul Thornton. I Dr. Paul Thornton is an award-winning author, a podcast host. He's won two major awards: the North Street Book Prize and the is it Florida FL Author and Publisher Association President Award.
That's correct.
Dr. Paul Thornton,
Thank you.
welcome to the Nanayaya Bush
I-
Show.
I'm glad to be here. And about calling me very handsome, the check is in the mail.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? When I read in your email, when I read about the joy of cruising and the joy of cruising back and everything, it's like I woke up this morning thinking I was floating on a cruise ship, everything is like, oh my goodness, I can't swim. I got to get off.
Well, I fantasize about floating on a cruise ship all the time, and I can't swim. I can't swim either. In fact, in
Yes.
fact, not being able to swim. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. We
Oh,
never saw water, or hardly ever saw water. And
yes.
one of the things that caused me to delay going on a cruise is because I didn't know how to swim. So that I was real anxious about getting on the water, but no more.
I, I'm going to make you laugh because of the historical, images that run through my head from
I I know where you're going. I already know where you're going.
so leave me on the land,
I hear
please.
you. I hear you.
Oh my goodness. I didn't mean to be bad, but you know what
Oh
I
no,
mean.
I
Yes.
know exactly how you feel.
Dr. Paul Thornton, if somebody should ask you, who are you? What is your backstory? What would you say?
I would answer that by saying I'm a writer. Um, and However, it's interesting to answer your question, what is my backstory? I've only been a
Mhm.
writer for a few years. When I woke up on December 7th of 2014, I had no desire to write, no plans to become a writer. I was 58 years old. Um, when I went to bed that night, I was a writer. So, so my
What
that
changed?
I know that my entree into the writing world was sudden and certainly not predicted. I've never had any thought of becoming a writer. Um, but
Mhm.
but on that day, my daughter, my oldest daughter, got married, and she had been hounding
Mhm.
me for several months. Dad, you got to give a talk at the reception. And I've never been one that was big on public speaking, even though I did a lot of it because I had a long career in the corporate sector, and then after that, in the
Mhm.
education sector, where as an administrator. So I had to do a lot of public speaking, but I never liked it
Mhm.
particularly. So I said to my daughter, I said, "Well, what do I have to talk about?" I obviously didn't want to do this, and
Mhm.
she said, "Talk about memories of me growing up."
Mm.
So that's what I, plan to do. And so I start giving a talk at the wedding. And to be honest, I can't give an authentic discussion of
Mhm.
memories of my daughter growing up without talking about the most powerful memory of all. And so I'm,
Mhm.
I'm I'm giving this talk, and I'm talking about first boyfriends and proms and high school sports and all the standard things that dads talk about at their daughter's wedding.
Mhm.
Uh, but then I was coming to close to the end of the speech, and I said, I can't stand up here and talk about memories of my daughter growing up without talking about the most powerful memory of all. So in 1985, 35 years
Mhm.
from when I was giving this talk, uh,
Yes.
I had a sudden uh, 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 medical calamity. I was 29 years old, and
Mm.
so I had uh, just to dramatize it in a capsule. A doctor said to me, "You have to do this, or you'll be dead in 6 months."
That.
So
Whoa.
so that was I guess he thought I was not going to go through with the medical things I needed to go through, and he felt the need to say that in front of my
Mhm.
crying wife, which was crazy. But anyway, getting back to my daughter's wedding. So I had an operation when I was 29 years old, and
Mhm.
I lost a lot, and I had to regain a lot, and some I never got back. So I had to
Mhm.
relearn to walk. And so at
Mm.
6 years old, my daughter would take me by the hand. I have a cane in my other hand, and we would walk every day through my mom's neighborhood where I was convalescing. So
Mhm.
and obviously I'll never forget that. I mean, 6 years old, uh,
Yes. Helping you along.
essentially retaught me to walk. And so
Mhm.
and so I gave the story at the wedding, and the crowd, you could hear a pin drop. And then I had to
Yes.
give some context around the incident, and I explained, you know, that I lost a lot, and for the
Mhm.
first time, I said some things that I knew maybe three-quarters of the people in the audience, and the first time I said things that people did not know, including some things, even my
Mhm.
mom. I lost in the operation, I lost my hearing, I lost sight on one side, I lost
Mm.
ability to taste, I suffered facial paralysis. And all
Mm.
of these were permanent. And so to give some context to my daughter walking me around, I told the further story of all of the things that I lost. And these were people many of these people had worked with me for 20 years, and they didn't know
Mhm.
that I couldn't hear on one side. They didn't know that I couldn't taste on one side. They didn't know I couldn't see on one side. They didn't know the story at all. And but the
Wow.
more I said, Nana, the better I felt. It was like it was
Yes.
like a burden was lifting off my shoulders
Off your
as I
shoulders.
as I
Yes.
spoke, because I never told anybody these things because I was embarrassed and self-conscious. But I
Mhm.
somehow just let it all out. And at the end of the talk,
Mhm.
as they say in Hollywood, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Uh,
Mhm.
and I said to myself, I mean, I feel liberated. I said, I've got to hold on to this feeling. And so when I went to my hotel room that night, I started
Mm-hmm.
writing my memoir. And that's so
Mm.
that's the story of how I woke up not a writer. I went to bed a writer. A year and a half later, my memoir was published. It was
Mm-hmm.
very provocatively named. It was called White Man's Disease, and there's a story. There's a story to White Man's Disease that is I couldn't tell that story here and take up all your time, but I will tell you this. I first heard the term white man's disease in the
Mm-hmm.
70s. I was watching a basketball game and it was a sportscaster. He was a white man and he
Yes.
used the term white man's disease. And Nana, I almost fell out of my chair because this was in the 70s. If a black man had said that, he'd gotten fired. Um,
Yes.
Now, so in my book, in the very first paragraph, I explain the context in which he used the term white man's disease, um, and 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 then I don't return to that until in the middle of the book. Why was the book titled White Man's Disease? You got to read it to understand it.
No, I want to know. I want to know so that when I get it, it's like, yes. Where can I get a copy of that book?
Okay, so if you read ebooks, you can get it on Amazon. If you read ebooks,
Oh, I'm a physical kind
okay.
of
If
girl.
you like the physical book, um, I
Yes.
have, and this is no exaggeration, I have like 5 copies left at home, but I'm reordering.
Yes.
I have some coming, but right now, I have very few copies, and so you would just go to my website. It's called whitemansdisease.com, and there's a place where you can order it, and I would
Hmm.
send it. I would sign it, and send it.
Okay.
So that's how I
Thank
came
you.
to write my first book, White Man's Disease.
Hmm.
It was very well received. It was I've written 4 books. It's the only book where I routinely received feedback from readers.
Hmm.
I used to live in Florida. I worked at a university
Hmm.
there. I even got a phone call one day from a woman that
Hmm.
obviously I did not know. She knew that I worked at this university because I said so in my book, and I guess she called the operator and got to me. And she wanted to know. She lived on the other side of town. She wanted to know if she can come and see me, and because she was so moved by the story. Uh, not to I'll tell you what her words were.
Hmm.
I certainly don't believe this, but she felt like I was a walking miracle and she wanted to meet me, and so she did. She came and she met me, and no, I'm not a walking miracle, but if she wanted to receive the story that way, that's fine with me.
That's okay. Yes. Hmm. Hmm. Wow, that white man's disease. I learned something. This is the beauty that I love about interviewing, having conversations with people. And I always learn something new. Every person I have had conversations with on the show has taught me something new. Today I learned about white man's disease, and we haven't even reached anywhere yet in this. Guys, if you have not subscribed to the show, please do so. Follow us on YouTube or on any podcast that you listen to. Dr. Paul Thornton. So we're having a conversation with Dr. Paul Thornton, award-winning author and podcast host as well of the Joys of Cruising. Before we even get to the subject matter of cruising, we are talking about the power of story and the importance of narrative. Everybody has a story, a story with us. We grew up with stories, and we share our stories to learn from each other, such as Dr. Paul Thornton is doing with us. And as an elder, there's always an impact of wisdom that is left. So for that, I am grateful. I am extremely happy to have you on the show. I know I said it, but I'm reiterating it. I am excited to have you on the show. So, aside from writing as catharsis or for you, writing your story, when you write, what is the intention behind it?
Well, the intention is very different depending on the books that I write. So the first book,
Mhm.
of course, as we talked about, was my memoir, and
Memoir, yeah.
and my intention, it was really very selfish, because at the end of that talk at the wedding,
Hmm.
I was a new person. I know, I,
Hmm.
I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but I hadn't been, I didn't consider myself a whole person since I was 29 years old. And now at 58, um, it was almost like I felt like I was getting my life back. I had become satisfied with my life
Mhm,
once I told my story.
mhm,
When I held my
mhm,
story in 30 some odd years, you know, I was just kind of living my life. I was glad I had
mhm,
survived my issues, but
mhm,
so when I got that sense of living my whole life at the end of
mhm,
that speech, I
mhm,
wrote the book for the purpose of holding on to that feeling.
mhm,
That was my motivation. Um, and so now when I write the cruise books, which are totally
mhm.
different, and that's my passion,
Yes,
cruising on the water with my family.
yes.
Um, that is more of trying to uh, present to the readers, the cruising community, uh,
Mhm,
the fun and relaxation and family and all the things that come with cruising. So that's really
mhm.
about reliving joyous times and trying to
Okay.
impart to the reader to bring stories, because all my cruise
Mhm,
books are about, they're about stories. I interview cruise personalities and share
mhm.
their stories with readers. So
Yes.
so it's very different depending on what I'm writing about. But white man's
Mhm,
disease, it solely was to hold on to you know this new life that I discovered.
mhm.
And by the way, I will be writing. I'm done with the cruise books. I wrote a trilogy, and so I wrote
Okay.
three books, and I don't plan to write another cruise book. I have a cruise podcast, as you know, and
Yes,
I plan to
yes.
continue cruising. As I said, that's my passion, but I don't plan to write about cruising anymore. I do plan to write a, I don't know if you call it a sequel, but a follow up to White Man's Disease, and it's called Gracefully. And
Oh, wow.
kind of like aging gracefully, So
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
so and that'll, that's probably going to come out in a couple of years. In fact, what I am going to
Mhm,
do, Nana, uh,
mhm.
prior to that sequel, I'm going to start another podcast. This is not, in a couple of months. I'm going to start another podcast. Um, it's going to be called Gracefully, just to lock up that name. But what the podcast is going to be about, it's going to be like a short series. I don't know how long it's going to be, but it's going to be called
Mhm,
Deconstructing White Man's Disease. And so what I'll do in each episode, I'll
mhm.
read an excerpt, not long because I know people don't want to be read to. but I'll read an excerpt. But then I'll talk about, you know, what was going through my mind,
Mhm.
you know, 38 years ago,
Mhm.
when I went, and believe it or not, the story is like laugh out loud funny, even though it's about something tragic. I mean, you know, in the book, a key individual dies. Obviously, it's not me. I survived the surgery, but someone else very close to me who was very uh, uh, integral to the story. They passed away. So there's tragedy, there's comedy, there's some laugh out loud funny minutes, and you could say,
Yes.
"Wow, how can you find humor when you almost
In.
died?" But you do, and I did. Um, so anyway, uh, this podcast series is called "Deconstructing White Man's Disease,"
Mhm.
and it'll talk about why was it called white man's disease and all of that. But
Mhm.
that is
Mhm.
of lesser importance than the
Mhm.
story, which is a story of inspiration,
Mhm.
perseverance,
Mhm.
resilience, and recovery.
Great, great, great. I think my follow up question when I listen to you speak, my follow up question is about gratitude. I sense it. You haven't used the word gratitude, but everything you saying speaks of it. How is gratitude key to you in life?
Uh, Key in that I'm still alive. Um, you know, uh, when you're 29, um, and you're told that you could die,
Hmm.
uh, you know, and you don't. I mean, there's a whole lot of gratitude to go around.
Hmm.
There's gratitude. I like to tell people I have, and I say this especially when there are some people, especially white men,
Hmm.
who are wary of the title.
Hmm.
Um, this is not a book slamming whites. So
Hmm.
so that's what some think with the title White Man's Disease. The fact of the matter is there's a number of heroes in the book. Um, Something like four or five real heroes in my life.
Hmm.
The, all but one was a white man.
Mm.
Now, there were a couple of doctors, obviously.
Yes.
You know who the one white man was who wasn't a doctor. This is a piece of trivia that is a lot of fun. Muhammad Ali. One of my
Hmm.
brothers he's a former pro boxer.
Hmm.
Um, Never did much in the sport, but after he stopped boxing, he got involved in the business side of
Hmm.
boxing, and he developed a relationship with Muhammad Ali and Muhammad Ali's management,
Hmm.
and so they were good friends. And so when I was recovering,
Hmm.
I got a phone call one day from my brother, the one who
Yes.
knows Muhammad Ali. This is from Las Vegas, and my wife at the time handed me the phone
Hmm.
and telling me it was my brother on the phone, and I went to say hello, and it wasn't my brother on the phone; it was Muhammad Ali.
Mm.
And so he gave me a talk, and
Hmm.
uh, it was obviously very very moving. He said he was praying for me. Uh,
Hmm.
But getting back to my point, the
Yes.
heroes in the book
Yes.
were white men, so it wasn't a book
Hmm.
slamming white men.
Hmm. 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 Wow, that is beautiful.
So
So,
so I do have a chapter in the book called Muhammad Ali. So
you're really teasing me with this book, and it's. You know what? I have to get my copy, break it down. This, trust me, we need. Um, We've gone over your background. You grew up in New York, and then moved to, where did you move to? Florida?
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up. Florida was actually in recent years. So I grew up in New York,
Mhm.
Brooklyn, and then Long Island,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
I went into the army. Uh,
Okay.
so that was most of the time when I was in the army, I was in Georgia,
Okay.
and then I came back up north and I worked in corporate. I got while I was after I got out the army, I got an MBA, and I
Mhm.
worked in the corporate sector up in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then when I got out of corporate and I got into the education sector first as a college professor,
Mhm.
and then I moved into administration. I was like a dean. Uh,
Mhm.
and so I did that for several years. I worked at Rutgers in New Jersey. Uh,
Mhm.
and then I saw an opportunity for a position in Florida as a
Mhm.
executive director of continuing education. So I moved
Mhm.
down there, and
Mhm.
we lived in Florida for 9 miserable years. So, so and, and
You know, you use the word miserable. Everybody wants to go to Florida. You say it's miserable.
it
Why?
was miserable, and so I
Why?
finally retired, and then I moved
Hmm.
to North Carolina 2 years ago.
Not okay. Okay. Nice. 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 Why was it miserable? Care to share?
Sure, sure. So a couple of things. Number one, weather-wise, it was it was hot. I mean, it was like you felt like you could, reach up and touch the sun. I mean, that was a different kind of hot. So right now, North Carolina is going through something. So every day is like over 90, and it is like unbelievably hot right now. And I
Hmm.
said, when I was living in Florida and it was like this, because it was like that every day, it was like being in
Yes.
prison. You didn't want to go outside. So that's one thing. Another thing is, and I don't want to bring this down into politics, but you know, that part of Florida is about the most red part of Florida in the state. So
Mm.
and they're real. They have more gun ranges there than they have McDonald's. So you see trucks with Confederate flags on them. And you want to get into arguments with people, but you got to be careful because anybody there can carry a concealed weapon.
Carrie. Yeah.
It's just not me. It's just not. It's like
Yes.
it's to me. It's like the Wild Wild West.
I think you said something which is really key for me is that where I am, that we have in this podcast, is a very small town outside of Toronto. And even within Toronto, the experience, Toronto, Canada, not anywhere Toronto in the US. No, I'm talking about Canadian,
Hmm.
Canadian and American differences.
Hmm.
Is that we tend not to see what you are describing here. Yes, it's something that we tend not to see only during television, or it's
Right.
televised, or yes, politics. You watch CNN, and
Right.
then all these things come up. But most, also, some of my audience are in West Africa.
Hmm.
Yes, most part of my audience are in West Africa, and the concept, and this is why I believe in the power of story. The view of America is, say, how do we call it? This New York City, all bright lights and everything, Hollywood kind of stuff.
Right,
Yes,
right, right.
yes, yes, yes. So it's sort of like, I wouldn't say a distorted view, but the selling point of America to the world, that is what they know, that is what they see. And many of us were in that realm before we came into, before we traveled, as they say, travel and see the world, experience the world, and get to know more of the world. Yes.
Yeah,
So I do hope that. Mhm,
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, America's just very divided, divided along racial lines, divided along, Democratic, Republican lines, or left, right lines, and where I was in Florida was sort of ground zero of that division, and I
mhm.
was just glad to. And not all parts of Florida are that bad, uh,
Yeah.
but I was in a very tough place to live for an African
Mhm,
American, in my
mhm,
opinion. In
mhm.
my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh wow. Makes it a bit scary for some of us to leave our quote unquote safe space here in
Yeah.
Canada.
I've
to,
actually,
to
I've been up there. My son-in-law was a he was a star for the Canadian Football League. So I've gotten
okay.
up to Toronto, Montreal.
Hmm.
But
Yes.
he played in Saskatchewan, so
Oh, okay.
I wasn't going all the way over there. But
Okay.
uh,
Nice, 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 nice. So let's talk about some, let's talk about your cruising, your passion for cruising. How, when, and how did it develop?
I've been cruising a long time. I haven't been passionate about it for a long time, but I had my first cruise in 1988,
Mhm,
and in 2000 well, let me relate it to writing. So after I
mhm,
wrote White Man's Disease, I tell you it was acclaimed. I got a lot of good feedback from readers.
mhm,
And the best feedback, I entered a number of book contests
mhm,
because I look at that as a form of marketing. And as an
mhm.
independent writer, you know all about, and your listeners know all about, the struggle of
Yes.
marketing. And so I tended to enter contests
Mhm,
early on, looking for two things. One, as a way to market inexpensively, but also looking for validation.
mhm,
And the book won a lot of awards. Um,
mhm,
when like as a finalist or honorable mention this
mhm,
or what have you. But there's one award, it won the grand prize. I mean, it wasn't final, it was
mhm,
the winner. And it's
mhm.
called the North Street Book Prize, um, which
Yes.
which as independent writers go, that's a very
Prestigious.
yeah, for a self-published book, and
Mhm,
I was very very pleased. Um, and so after writing that first book, uh, I knew that I wanted to write more.
yes.
I didn't know write about what, I didn't know, but I knew I wanted to write more.
Mhm,
And so in 2018, I decided to take my family, my extended family, so my two daughters, one of their husbands, and my two grandkids and my wife. We
mhm,
decided to go for Christmas on a cruise.
mhm,
And so so in researching the cruise, what I found was there were a lot of interesting cruise personalities with
mhm,
interesting stories. And
mm,
and I said, I've seen a lot of guides on cruising and all that. I'm no expert on cruising, so I'm not interested in writing a guide, but I've never
mhm.
seen anywhere that cataloged, chronicled these fascinating stories. And
Experiences. Yeah.
so that visit or that cruise in 2018 is what
Mhm,
was the genesis of the notion of writing a book about cruising. And
mhm,
so I did. And like I said, it really wasn't about me or my thoughts on cruising so much as it was about me interviewing well-known cruisers. Some are well-known, some are not. But I
mhm.
do have some. I have actually have some celebrities in there. Uh, but
Yes.
So that's how I wrote the first book, and it was a lot of fun. It was called The
Mm.
Joy of Cruising.
Yes.
And so it was kind of an easy decision to write a
Mm-hmm.
follow up. And so I
Mm-hmm.
decided to write a follow up called More Joy of Cruising.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed maybe half of the people in the book. It's about half written,
Mm-hmm.
and then the pandemic came,
Heck, yeah.
and people were dying, uh, and so I stopped writing. I couldn't write about something where joy is in the title and there's people dying all around me.
Mm-hmm.
After several months, um, I started back writing, and I changed the
Mm-hmm.
title from "More Joy of Cruising" to
Mm-hmm.
"Cruising Interrupted," and
Mm-hmm.
it actually came out when cruising was shut down globally, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last book is called "The Joy of Cruising Again," and
Yes.
it was sort of meant to celebrate the return of cruising
Turn.
after the shutdown. Because to be honest, as a lover of cruising, I had read enough to be genuinely worried that cruising wasn't going to survive the shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
But it has come back. It's doing great, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so I thought I'd write one last book on cruising, and
Mm-hmm.
so I did. I still have passion for cruising. I just don't plan to write any more books about it. So
Yes.
that's what motivated me to
Yes.
start the podcast, the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how long have your podcast been going now?
Uh, uh,
For the joys
just
of cruising.
just since February. So
Okay.
I finished the book in January,
Mm-hmm.
and while I was waiting on the publishing process and the printing process, I started the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and now it has been really successful. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, really successful. I go to a lot of podcast groups and what have you, and
Mm-hmm.
when I read what people are doing and the number of downloads they have and all that, I consider myself really fortunate because in what
Mm-hmm.
5 months, 6 months, I'm not sure how many months that is, you know, I'm getting the kind of traction that some people don't
Yes.
get after a couple of years. So I consider myself fortunate. I've found something.
You indeed you found because I haven't seen anything really talking about cruises like when I did a little Google on you.
Okay, okay.
Yes, I Googled you up. Thank
It,
you. Uh,
well, I tell you what, it's nice to be Googleable.
yes. So I found it so unique. I found it unique because it is a black person, African, I don't know which terminology to use these days, African American, black person, a
Fine.
person of color,
All,
whichever
all,
that it
all,
is.
all I proudly wear. So
Yes. Writing about their experience. So the angle was what really caught my attention. For me, it's not a matter of the majority talking about cruising and the joy of cruising, but this is from, you know, a black person's point of view, looking at cruising from this point, from this aspect, and actually enjoying it and sharing that narrative
hmm
with with us. So it kind of, and that's why I became so interested. It's like, okay, so what can I learn from you about cruising and dispel this fear I have of going on a cruise?
yeah, and Nana, it's really stories from a lot of different angles. Now, as you kind of
Hmm.
implied, cruising is not necessarily looked at as a black pastime. Um,
Yes.
so in the first book, I had about 30 different stories of uh, and they came from all different angles. But
Yeah.
one story, and I had several black stories, but
Mm-hmm.
they were mostly non-black, because mostly non-black
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
crews. But blacks are very important contributors to
Yes.
that pastime. And so I wrote
Mm-hmm.
a story in the first book, and she's actually going to be on the podcast on August 31st.
Mm-hmm.
So I urge your listeners to check it out, because you don't necessarily
Beautiful.
have to enjoy cruising. So this one story I wrote was about, or one feature I did was about a cruise called Festival at Sea. So what Festival
Mm-hmm.
at Sea is the only one of its kind. It's an African American cultural cruise. So
Oh, okay.
they have things like they have black fashion shows, and
Yeah.
fraternities and sororities do things, and they raise money for United Negro College from with activities. They do
Mm-hmm.
have entertainment, uh, you know, you know,
Mm-hmm.
big name entertainment on
Mm-hmm.
the cruise that just took place. They had now I'm drawing about Kim, the musician
Mm-hmm.
Kim. They had Charlie Wilson. But it's not mainly
Yeah.
a music cruise. It's an African American cruise. So
Mm-hmm.
this person, this company, they charter the whole ship. It's just them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about 99% black. I mean, you can go there and be white. Obviously, there's many people, there are interracial couples, or what have you,
Yes.
but it's mostly black, and uh, and so they do this cruise every year. It's called Festival
Mm-hmm.
C, and every year it sells out. I mean, it's the
Mm-hmm.
loyalty. The loyalty is off the charts, and
Mm-hmm.
so on the 31st, and I featured her in the first book. On the 31st, I'm interviewing the founder of Festival at Sea, because
Oh, okay.
this is a black woman who is business history. I mean, she is, you know, I don't think there's anybody bigger in cruising that's black. You know,
Yes.
so it's while it's not a black book per se,
Mm-hmm.
I try to find angles that
Mm-hmm.
black people appreciate. You know,
Yes.
so so there's a mix of stories, and yeah, there's some black, but there's obviously as many more white than black.
Yeah, I think what I really meant to drive at is you, the author, being a black person and it coming from your perspective
Yeah, yeah,
rather than the author being white
right,
coming from a white perspective.
yeah,
Because how you view it, your lens, your hearing, and everything is based on experience and filter. So I think that is more what I was driving
right,
at.
right.
Yes, 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 yes. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. Dr. Paul Thornton. Okay. So, how would you, for somebody like me, scared off, what is your best advice or encouragement to go on a cruise?
Well, again, it's coming from someone who grew up in the inner city, knew nothing about
Mhm.
water, and couldn't swim. And I've gotten over that fear. So, you know, get over any fear that you have, and go and just have fun. Now, one way to, I probably shouldn't say this to someone who's worried, but I early on I rationalized it as, there's several thousand people on this ship.
Yeah.
Uh, if this ship goes down, we're going down together. And I know that's kind of a morbid way to look at things, but hey, we're all in this together. I know, Nana. That's small consolation, but
No,
that's a
that's
way.
not
That's a
one
way.
at all.
That's a way to joke about it.
Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, goodness gracious.
And the other thing I used to worry about before
Mm,
I cruised for the first time, you spending all of this money, and you don't know if you are susceptible to seasickness. You know, I
That's
was real
true.
worried. Yeah, and but I didn't have any seasickness. I would say over the years, every once in a while, my wife says she could feel the ship moving, and
Mm,
she needs to sit down or something like that, but not any outrageous sickness. So most people now, most people who go on a cruise, I would say, never did any empirical study, but just from anecdotal study, I would say 9 times out of 10, when a person goes on their first cruise, they get hooked.
mm,
They get hooked on their first cruise.
yes.
Now, it might not work out for you, but I got a feeling you're going to try it one time, and
I,
what I would suggest is go on like a 4 night cruise first.
mm,
Don't do. They normally are like 7 nights.
mm-hmm.
Don't do 7 nights because who knows if you do have a terrible seasickness problem, which I haven't really run across very many people who have a terrible seasickness problem. At least you're not going to be on there stuck on that all week.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I will try it and I will let you know how it goes.
I a friendly bet that you will enjoy it.
Most definitely, most definitely. Dr. Paul Thornton, thank you so much. Guys, if you were watching us, we're having a conversation. In fact, a delightful conversation with Dr. Paul Thornton, who is an award winning author. And also, if you love cruises, or even if you don't and you are interested in cruising, he is the master of it all. It's his passion. He's written about it. And he also has a podcast, an informative podcast that I have skimmed through. So, Dr. Paul Thornton, a big thank you for coming on the Nana Yayabua show and podcast. You
Thank
are all over the world right now, in North America and on the continent.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And on the continent, I just got on something called Boomplay, which is, I guess, the largest streaming service on the continent. And
Boom
they have pot Boomplay, boom and then play,
play.
and
Okay.
yeah. So and they carry podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly Afro beats music, obviously,
Yes,
but
yes.
they also carry podcasts.
Ah,
So my podcast is available, uh, you know, on the continent.
yes. Beautiful. I didn't realize you were Afrobeating. I would have played you some Afrobeat music.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm into music, and my new thing is Afrobeat. So
Okay, well, the music circles back and back, goes around and
yep,
around and around. And you know what?
Wiz, Kid.
Wizkid, okay, okay.
Yep,
Wizkid
yep,
is
yep,
your favorite. Okay,
yep,
good
yep.
to know. Good to know. I hope you'll hear it from your mouth to his ears. Okay,
There
Wizkid
you
it
go.
is.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And have a beautiful day.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me. And I'll use the way I close on the cruise podcast in case you have any cruises in the audience. I'll see you on the ocean.
I'll see you on the ocean. I'll be standing on the land, waving you bye bye.
Eventually, Nana, we're going to get you on a cruise ship.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, goodness gracious.